Chapter 12, the other one. He'd been ranging further lately. Not because the immediate area was exhausted. There were still houses on the western streets he hadn't fully cleared, still salvage potential in the blocks around the pocket, still things to find within a comfortable radius of Mercer Court. He ranged further because the radio work had reached a stage that required something from him he couldn't manufacture by staying close. The components were assembled. The chassis was wired. What remained was a problem he needed to think around rather than at, and thinking around problems required moving, and moving required distance. So he went further. The northern edge of the suburb gave way, after a mile or so, to a different kind of development, newer, or what had been newer before everything stopped being any particular age. Larger lots, wider streets, houses that had been designed with the assumption of more space, and had therefore spread themselves out, low and horizontal, with the confident sprawl of buildings that had never expected to be ruins. The trees here were younger too, planted in rows with the deliberate regularity of landscaping rather than the accidental grace of trees that had simply been there. He moved through it in his usual way, observation and catalog, the map building itself in his head as he walked, landmarks noted for later transcription. A water tower visible above the roofline to the northwest. A school, the long low kind with the wide windows, the parking lot gone back to weeds and the portable classrooms at the far end collapsed on one side. He marked the school. Schools sometimes had things. He was on his second circuit of the northern streets, the loop he ran when he was working through a problem, the same route twice because the second pass always showed him things the first had missed when he became aware of it. Not because of any sound, not because of movement in his peripheral vision. He became aware of it the way you became aware of being watched, a shift in the quality of the air around you, a directionality that arrived before the evidence for it. He'd learned to trust this. Out here, the things that kept you alive were often the things that arrived before their evidence. He didn't stop walking. He adjusted his pace, marginally slower, the adjustment invisible to anyone watching, and changed his sightlines without changing his posture. He looked with his peripheral vision and the reflections in windows and the shadows that told you where the light was coming from and what was interrupting it. 3 houses back, moving when he moved, stopping when he stopped. He completed the block, he turned the corner, he stopped on the other side of the corner and waited. It came around the corner 40 seconds later and stopped. It was a Series 4. He knew the frame by now, the shoulder configuration, the plating, the head unit design. But where the jumpy one had been degraded, plating warped and gate hitching, and the whole machine operating at some fraction of its original coherence, this one was intact. The plating was weathered but unbroken. The joints moved cleanly. It stood with the balanced stillness of a machine that was functioning as it had been designed to function. What it had not been designed to do, presumably, was follow a man through a suburb for 3/4 of a mile and then stop around a corner from him and wait. They looked at each other. He was aware of the word asterisk looked being imprecise. The unit's optical sensors were active, the faint blue of them in the flat gray morning, and oriented toward him, but optical sensors oriented toward a thing was their default function. Registration, data collection, that was not looking. Except, there was the quality of it. The orientation of the whole machine, not just the sensors, the slight forward inclination of the torso, barely perceptible, the weight shifted in a way that suggested attention rather than targeting. He'd seen targeting. He'd crouched behind a car for 2 hours watching a jumpy unit target things. This was not that. This was, he reached for the word and found the only one that fit, interest. He didn't move. He stood on the sidewalk with his pack on his back and his hands at his sides and let the situation be what it was. The unit stood at the corner, its head moved. The tilt was small, 10 degrees, maybe 15, the head unit inclining to one side. He'd seen this gesture in animals. In dogs specifically, the head tilt that meant something had presented them with a thing they were trying to process. He'd always understood the gesture in dogs as a kind of earnestness, the whole body of the animal trying to understand something. He stood on the sidewalk and watched a Series 4 military unit tilt its head at him and felt the ground of his categories shift slightly underfoot. He thought about the 2 units in, he stopped. He didn't know why he'd started that thought. He didn't have a memory of 2 units to reference. He stood on the sidewalk and the thought arrived half-formed and dissolved before he could examine it, leaving only a residue. A feeling of a room, fluorescent light, something he'd seen through a window. He let it go. They stayed like that for a while, him on the sidewalk, the unit at the corner, the suburb around them doing its quiet, indifferent things. He tried something. He wasn't sure why. It wasn't a calculated decision, more the kind of action that happens in the space before deliberation closes the option off. He took one step toward the unit. The unit did not raise its weapons. It did not shift into a targeting stance. It did not do any of the things a military unit encountering an unidentified entity in a combat-designated environment was presumably designed to do. It took one step back. Not away, not retreat. The posture didn't change, still the forward inclination, still the tilted head, still the quality of interest that he was increasingly committed to calling interest despite having no technical vocabulary to support the term. Just one step back, matching his one step forward, maintaining the distance. He stopped. The unit stopped. He almost said something. The impulse arrived and surprised him, the desire to speak, to put words into the air between them, to attempt some form of what? Communication? He was standing in a suburb at the end of the world about to talk to a military robot that had followed him for 3/4 of a mile, and he was trying to find something to say. He didn't say anything. He's not sure how long they stood there. Long enough that the flat gray morning shifted toward flat gray midday, and the shadows shortened and Lumpy's collar on his wrist caught the light once. He became aware of the collar because the light moved, and then he was aware of having raised his wrist slightly, an unconscious motion as if presenting it. As if the ID tag that read Lumpy was something that could be read at 10 feet by optical sensors that were not designed to read cat collar tags. He lowered his wrist. The unit's head returned to level. The quality of attention didn't change. Then it turned, not abruptly, a smooth rotation, the whole machine reorienting with the same clean functionality that distinguished it from the jumpy one. It walked away up the street. The gait was even, the pace unhurried. At the far end of the block, it turned left without looking back. He stood on the sidewalk and watched the space where it had been. He walked back to Mercer Court thinking about nothing specific, which was how he processed things that didn't have an immediate category. The northern suburb, the school he'd marked, the water tower. His feet knew the way and he let them know it while the rest of him turned over the thing that had happened without trying to land it anywhere. It had followed him, it had matched his movement, it had tilted its head. It had looked at him, the way things looked at things they were trying to understand. He knew what that was. He recognized it because he did it himself, had been doing it for months, moving through the suburb with his log and his map and his 2 pass circuits, trying to understand the thing he was in the middle of, trying to read the place he'd ended up. The unit had been doing the same thing. To him, that night he sat at the table with the log open and wrote the day's entry. He wrote it in his usual shorthand, the northern range, the school marked for return, the water tower noted. He wrote Series 4 unit, intact, non-hostile, followed approx 0.75 miles, disengaged without incident. He wrote the head tilt. He wrote the matched step. Then he stopped. He looked at what he'd written. He looked at the words asterisk non-hostile and asterisk followed and asterisk matched step, and he thought about the unit standing at the corner with its weight inclined forward and its head tilted, and its optical sensors carrying the particular quality of something that was trying to understand what it was looking at. He wrote 2 more lines. It was looking for something. He looked at the line, then he wrote the second. So am I. He closed the log. He sat for a long time at the table in the quiet house with the seashells on the windowsill, and the collar beside them, and the radio chassis on the workbench, and the map on the wall with its circles and triangles, and the city suggested at the eastern edge. Outside, the suburb held its silence. He didn't feel alone in it tonight in exactly the way he usually felt alone in it, which was not the same as not feeling alone. It was more specific than that, more located. As if the alone had a shape now, a defined boundary, something that could be measured because something outside it had briefly pressed against it and he'd felt the pressure. He went to bed. He lay in the dark and thought about a machine that followed things it didn't understand and waited at corners and tilted its head. He thought about what it meant that he recognized that. He didn't find an answer before sleep came, but the question felt important in a way that the questions that didn't have answers sometimes did, not urgent, not distressing, just present, a thing that was going to matter. He slept.